Hello and welcome. Happy Tuesday, everyone. We usually open the show with a clip, and we're just going to get right into it because we've been actually working on questions for this show, and there's been a little bit of a debate in the production room on what we should ask, how we should ask it, different approaches. There was a 30-minute conversation on what constitutes the PMC before we even went on air. So it's a full packed house today. So let me bring in my number one co-host, my homie, my dog. You know him as the writer for Black Agenda Report, and now you know him as the man that pushed back against Norman Finkelstein, Pascal Robert.
What's going on, my brother Jason Miles?
How are you?
Doing all right. Looking forward to the show.
Getting a lot of comments about your back and forth with the great Norman Finkelstein.
I see that. I do.
And also coming in to help us out for tonight is he usually comes in on our Foreign Policy Thursdays, but this subject of organizing on the left in the era of COVID and automation is near and dear to his heart. Mean Gene Bajlan.
Greetings, everybody. It is a pleasure to be here with you all as usual. And Jason, thank you for airing our dirty laundry about the production meeting. Everybody, much appreciated. I'm looking forward to it.
It was a beautiful discussion by very smart men, and I was just sitting there in awe of the discussion. So also, we are joined today with a very special guest. People were a little heartbroken that this person wasn't on the show earlier, but she is here. She hosts the Antifada. She was on the Majority Report. She's been on everybody's show. You know her as writer, anarcho-communist, Jamie Peck.
Hey. What's up, guys?
Welcome, Jamie Peck.
Oh, thank you.
And last but not least, he is the show economist. He's everyone's favorite economist. He loves shitting on libertarians and right-wingers on Twitter. Dr. Asatar Bair.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you all.
Thank you guys for joining. The chat is already rumbling. People are prepared with their questions, Dr. Bair. I'm going to try not to derail the show because you know how it is whenever you're on. Everybody wants to ask you a ton of questions. Yes, son.
Even though I keep on telling everyone I do not have the answers.
Pascal, you want to start it off?
Absolutely. Dr. Bair, Jamie, I'm glad you're here. Jamie, I want to start off with you. I want to ask you a question since what I understand you are not also merely a media personality.
You're going to have to ask that again, Pascal. You're breaking up.
Can you hear me now? Did I break up?
It's your Wi-Fi. Ask it again.
Oh my God. I just got a booster.
Okay, yeah.
The question I wanted to ask you is that what does organizing look like for a left that's still in development in a post-Sanders moment when we're faced with COVID-19 and labor is kind of not exactly having the victories that we thought we would have had in Bessemer, Alabama, and that we now know that 30 to 40% of the jobs that were lost during COVID are being replaced by automation. How exactly does this new left deal with the reality of organizing with these kind of factors? Or are we really just stuck in a kind of moment where we become online personalities?
Well, I think that's the $1 million question. I appreciate you not starting off with any small talk. I mean, what does it look like? I think I would say that the uprising that happened last summer in the wake of George Floyd's death, although it wasn't just about George Floyd, right? Lots and lots of other people have been killed by the police as well, disproportionately Black people. I would say that has had a greater impact on the current political landscape than the unsuccessful Bernie campaign on a number of levels. And that's certainly where I've been focusing my energies these days as part of the defund campaign to defund the NYPD. Our short-term goal is to defund the NYPD by half, so $3 billion, and redistribute those funds to the parts of the state. Oh yeah, I am hearing a weird feedback. Are you guys hearing that?
Yeah, I don't think it's me.
Gene, turn your volume down.
Okay. Keep going.
Yeah, and we're gonna redistribute those dollars to the parts of the state that are, still very carceral in many ways, still used to surveil and survey and police the lives of the poor, but certainly more geared towards keeping people alive than the parts of the state that are designed to kill people, right? Like healthcare, housing, education, things of that nature. That's the short-term goal. Long-term goal, obviously, is abolition and communism. But I think this is something that's been on everybody's minds. And I think it's up to the members of the organized left to kind of cohere like a coherent abolitionist politics that makes sense within a Marxist framework and within material analysis. None of that sort of rad lib version of abolition where you like get rid of the police and prisons but somehow keep capitalism in place. Like the thing that the police and the prisons have been designed to uphold. So I think that's where a lot of my priorities lie right now. And I'm not sure if anything that we're doing is going to make a huge difference in the long run. I have no idea. Maybe we're fucked. But certainly in the short term, we've got some really great candidates running for city council because they have a lot of power over the police budget. I've been making some calls for Brandon West, for instance, DSA endorsed guy. There's more of them. You can look up the whole slate if you're interested. I'm also on the action planning subcommittee because, as we know, electoralism alone is not going to do shit, right? We need a vibrant and powerful and numerous movement on the outside, pushing things further and further, scaring the shit out of the ruling class. What role the organized left per se has in that, I'm not sure. I think the vanguard last summer, the people burning down police precincts and smashing up cop cars were largely not part of the organized left. But we're gonna do whatever we can do to unfuck the world.
Dr. Bair, what is your answer to that? Speaking of unfucking worlds.
Yeah, I like what Jamie said. That was good. I agree. I think we're in a kind of post-honeymoon period with Bernie, because there's a lot of excitement around the 2016 race, the 2020 race. But then when we see the kind of way that Bernie's been forced into line to support the Biden administration, it's just very, I think, I can certainly speak for myself. I lose a lot of my enthusiasm for Bernie, and see him as, okay, now he's being forced to toe the line, or he is towing the line, or whatever. So I don't see a whole lot of a way forward in terms of picking up that movement. I think a movement coalesced around that campaign, and then is in the process of finding some other point to coalesce around, because I don't think there's no way forward really through Bernie, or that's my feeling on it. So I think we need to work on other issues, and I'm wondering what is going to happen with the Black Lives Matter movement, because the underlying issues don't seem to have changed one bit. And we're certainly seeing a whole lot of police executions. So I don't know if that issue is going to continue to be salient moving forward. I agree with Jamie that it doesn't feel like the streets are being led by any kind of vanguard or any kind of organization. And, not that that's bad. I think we just want to be accurate about what's happening, and then try to find some way of intervening, that makes sense given the moment. I don't know what that is. I'll be honest. But I think the conditions are very much there for a kind of powerful mass movement.
Speaking of mass movements, I've watched that. I did an Oscars episode the other day with Ben Burgess and a bunch of other people, and I watched that really horrible movie, The Trial of the Chicago 7. If you were to juxtapose 1968 to now, how far do you think we're just nowhere near how large the left was at that point in time?
Well, there's been a lot of destruction of the left since then, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of intentional disorganization, a lot of, the COINTEL program, right? This is but I think in terms of like organic conditions, which like Marx says, right? Capitalism produces its own gravediggers. In terms of that, I think the conditions are actually pretty similar to that period. Where there are and in a lot of ways the working class is worse off. I mean, like 1968 is kind of like the peak period for like the real value of the minimum wage, right? And it's been deteriorating for decades since then. And that's not true just for the minimum wage, right? It's true for the bottom 90% of the US workforce. So I mean, most people's lives have basically gotten worse for decades. And that is extremely unusual relative to the history of capitalism. But it's also part of its pattern, right? I mean, that, again, Marx pointed out, he said, these are some of the tendencies of this complex system that are sometimes reversed, yes, and sometimes accelerated. So we don't want to act like it's some kind of linear, simplistic thing. It's not, right? But we seem to be at a moment of very strong, bourgeois supremacy right now. And that creates its own weaknesses. Again, dialectics, right? Like at the very moment that a thing appears to be the strongest, it is often the weakest, right? It is often at the end of its strength, like when you go to deliver a blow and you're fully extended, that's it, right? You're at full extension. And I wonder if capitalism is not reaching kind of full extension, and might see a kind of reversal. I don't think that's going to be led by a few, brilliant leaders or something, a few, great men or great women or whatever. I think that's going to be led by the masses. And it makes it kind of a puzzle to see, well, where are the masses now?
So I had a quick question. I want to ask specifically Jamie, what do you see the role of a group like Democratic Socialists of America, which I should note that I am also a member of, although the Springfield branch is probably a little bit different from your branch in New York City. What do you see the role of that organization in sort of expanding, working class political activism? And how do you react to accusations from some quarters of the left that the DSA is merely sheepdogging leftists into the Democratic Party?
I mean, you can't really generalize about DSA because, as you know, it is a sprawling, democratic, volunteer-run organization with many moving parts and many different chapters all over the country. So I think that is probably true of some corners of DSA. But there are also, anarchists and communists have organized themselves into caucuses to push a different kind of anti-capitalist politics, one that really takes seriously the idea of a world beyond capitalism, beyond this kind of social democratic autarky that some people would like to see, and tries to figure out what is to be done. And within that, there are lots of disagreements as well. But yeah, I'm very critical of electoralism. I'm critical. I mean, even in the course of doing it, I'm critical of the things that I'm doing. Ask me a year from now how I feel about it after having participated in it for a little while longer. But yeah, no, sure. I think it's very possible. Like it's always a double-edged sword, right? Because if it's a debate going back to Lenin and Rosa, and I think they were kind of both right. I guess that's a dialectic, but maybe Rosa was a little more right on the question, like, should communist parties be participating in bourgeois parliaments, right? And we don't have a parliament in this country, so that's like already one layer removed, right? But we got to do something, right? Like, if we don't participate in the bourgeois parliaments at all, yeah, I actually am sympathetic to that idea. There's lots of other things that we should be doing outside of electoral politics that are really, really important, such as building networks of mutual aid, creating these independent working class institutions so that people are able to feed each other, people are able to fight, people are able to take care of their needs and each other's needs, outside of the state. I think these institutions of counterpower at best can serve to delegitimize the state, the bourgeois state. And sorry, I lost my train of thought. Oh man, it's been a long day.
Pascal, you want to say something?
I just got out of my Capital reading group, but wait, what I was going to say about it was, like, worst case scenario, yeah, it just sheepdogs people into a bourgeois political party. Best case scenario, we increase our power to fight. But I think it is a bit of a red herring saying whether we should participate via the Democratic Party or via some independent ballot line, right? Because I think at the end of the day, if we want to participate in electoral politics at all, we got to use the Democratic ballot line in most cases if we want to win. If we want to win in primaries, if our goal is to win and not just to send a message. And I think the thing, we've seen socialist parties in the past get into power and they become the administrators of austerity, right? Because capitalist social relations are still in place. The classic example of this is Syriza in Greece, right? This was a party full of like actual Marxists. When push came to shove, they could not stand up against the World Bank, and Greece is fucked. I mean, Greece is probably fucked either way, but they did what they said they weren't going to do, which is to implement austerity. So I think what's more important than what ballot line we're running on is, do we have an independent base of working class power from which all of these activities are flowing, activities which include engaging in elections or not, depending on, what we've democratically decided is the best course of action. We need these independent sources of workers' power, independent from the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, independent from the traditional labor bureaucracy, even. We need these sources of independent power if we want to get anything done. And I think that is ultimately going to determine how successful we are as socialists, whether we're running as, Democrats in name only, or whether we're running on an independent ballot line.
Well, I have a quick follow-up for that question. So obviously, your skepticism towards electoralism is well taken, and I think it's also well known by everybody. But I want to sort of get your take on the rise of the social democratic left within the Congress. Figures like AOC, Ilhan Omar, Cory Bush, just to name a few, some of whom are actually, especially in the case of Cory Bush, who's from here in the great state of Missouri, are from the working class. Do you think the squad is, in general, a kind of positive development, or do you think it's a political dead end that sort of captures political energy? Are they a potential catalyst for radicalization, or are they a break on the potential radicalization of American politics?
Honestly, I'm not sure how relevant the squad is on either end of that question. Right? I hate to say it, or maybe I don't, because it's never been my my primary bailiwick.
They're kind of
really
powerless second-term Congress people that they don't have the level of power that the people they want them to fight have, like the Pelosi's of the world.
Yeah, like I think it's a mistake to turn it into a question of like individual metal, right? Like, oh, this person isn't a real progressive if they're not doing A, B, and C, right? Like, and I don't think any of us should fool ourselves into thinking that we'd do any better if we were put into that position. There They're not that many people. They're not that many votes in Congress. And yeah, a lot of the things that happen are going to be overdetermined by the directives of the capitalist system, and the people managing it are really in obedience to that. I mean, we've seen Joe Biden passing some like pretty broadly like social democratic measures. Well, I don't want to go that far, but like he's not doing the neoliberal solutions that Obama tried, right? Is it because the squad is pushing Joe Biden to the left? Is it because Bernie's been pushing him to the left? No, like we got owned, right? And he made it very clear that he had no intention of sharing power with the left in any way, shape, or form, right? Like these measures we're seeing, this increased social spending, this kind of Keynesian stimulus, this is nothing more than the left wing of capital, which is the smart wing of capital currently, taking measures to shore up the system so that accumulation can continue and the line will go back up, you know? Because as we all know, we are in a crisis of profitability going back to the 1970s that we have yet to get out of in any meaningful way. Neoliberalism was sort of the barbarism, you know, the way that they found to keep the system going, to juice the rate of profit. And that worked for, you know, a few decades. And now the juice has run out. So they're like, oh shit, I guess we have to try something else. Will it work? In the long term, no, I don't think capitalism can be fixed. I think it's caving in on itself more and more every day. And I think it's becoming apparent to more and more people. But to go back to your question about the squad, yeah, no, I don't think they're terribly relevant. I think people expect too much of them. Like I never really considered them to be part of the socialist movement. So I was never really disappointed with them. You know,
why do you think there's so much AOC discourse, whether it's, you know, standing for AOC or like just endlessly attacking AOC? Why do you think the online left and the sort of left media space is so obsessed with figures like Omar, AOC, Cory Bush, and so on? Is it
clicks?
Is it a sign of their impotence?
Yeah, I mean, it's an expression of powerlessness. It's an expression of a thing I will call depoliticization. It's an expression of the spectacle, you know, not like just like media and movies, but just the idea that the market and these capitalist social relations and this alienation has been so fully infused into every aspect of our culture, including our political culture, right? Like people engage with politics the way that they engage with like, you know, fantasy football or
WWF wrestling,
celebrities or something, right?
I agree.
Like this is so many layers removed from like the actual.
Do you feel like it's more frustrating now than it even was in the 80s?
Oh,
when it comes to politics as celebrity, like when you made the comment about people engaging in politics like fantasy football, I agree totally, and I think the lockdown made it worse for a lot of people. To really look at electoral politics like it is some sort of sport, and you can just say things online, ergo a movement is made, right? Mm-hmm. Off a lot of the hashtag activism. Pascal, you look like you want to say something.
I'm really appreciating Jamie's responses here, man. She's coming really sharp, straight, direct, and I like her response to Jean's questions. My question for her, in light of the fact that she believes that we need to move to this very, very strong, direct kind of Marxist reality, moving towards communism, which I have no problem with her making that argument. But my question to that is that what happens in reality when the ideological infrastructure of society is premised on reifying the capitalist reality, that the working class, the average working class, sees himself as an aspiring millionaire more than a person oppressed by his boss. In other words, I think that, you know, those of us on the left who understand the rhetoric and the ideology and the literature and the scholarship of leftism, Marxism, socialism, anti-capitalism, we all understand why capitalism is problematic. But how do we get to the ideological superstructure, base structure, and the actual capitalist realism that is promoted in everything from media, television, education, schools, religion, et cetera, so on and so forth? If we do not have a left that is interested in that kind of radical transformative politics, but more interested in simply a Keynesian reboot 2.0, do we even have the cadre that's prepared for that kind of work?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of answered your question while you were asking it, right? Like, there are no shortcuts to this stuff. And we obviously cannot rely on some left populist bourgeois politicians to do it for us. I mean, my hope was that, they would at least get some people thinking about class more so than they had been before, because class consciousness, as you said, is not where it needs to be. But I think a lot of people do have sort of the building blocks for an anti-capitalist politics. Like, they might not think of it in those terms, but a lot of people know that they hate getting up early and going to work every morning, and they hate having no freedom at work. They hate getting talked down to and bossed around and told like when they can and can't go to the bathroom or go on vacation and spend time with their families and do the things that make life worth living for them. And I think, working class people, especially if you want to talk about the Black proletariat in this country, are very conscious of the ways that they're being oppressed and being literally murdered by the state every day. And I think we saw a huge upswell of that anger over the last summer. And I think we're going to see it some more going forward, because as we all know, these reforms, these reforms that the Democrats have proposed in an effort to recuperate that energy and let some of the air out of the tires, they're not going to do shit. So I'm cautiously optimistic about the potential of the proletariat in this country to,
you brought up a
change.
point. You brought up a point that I'd like to kind of pivot to, and you brought it up on your own, so that's why I'll go there. That you're optimistic about the Black proletariat. Now, the racialization of capitalism, as we all know as good leftists, requires that Black people are redundant to the surplus army of labor disproportionately. We get that. However, because of the ideological infrastructure that exists in Black politics and society, capitalist realism has almost a hyper effect in the Black community because of celebrity status, the reification of Black capitalism, and so on and so forth. And combine that with the fact that the Black political class is being weaponized to neutralize materialist, socialist, class-based politics, as we saw in the 2016 and 2020 election. And my argument has always been that there will be no left in America without Black people, but Black politics will be used to try to neutralize it. So how do we have a situation now where most of the left, particularly its speakers, are predominantly white, and there's not a large portion of left politics into communities of Black people that is not based simply on racial oppression due to police? How do we actually get around that reality or change it?
I mean, that is it's $1 million question, right? It's going to be so important to doing the thing that needs to be done in unwinding capitalism in this country and all over the world. I mean, yeah, every social movement has been recuperated by capital so far to a large degree. Whether you want to talk about, people who were much more radical in the 1960s, civil rights activists who are now members of Congress and much more conservative than we would probably like to see. Man, I mean, talking about police violence, talking about abolition, I think is a door into talking about the issues with capitalism, because once maybe someone's not terribly aware of the connections at first, but looking at the number of people who are being killed by police, looking at the racial aspect to it, and seeing where that leads. I mean, the hope is it points in some very radical directions, because once someone's like, wow, I hate the fucking cops, they keep killing us. Why do they keep killing us? It's really a hop, skip, and a jump to saying, oh, maybe we should get rid of the cops. Oh, what would it involve to get rid of the cops? Actually, a revolution against the system that the cops are serving to uphold. So, I don't know. I mean, we need to be promoting Black voices in a leftist alternative media. Obviously, I think I try to do that with my show. I could always do a better job, for sure. I mean, people need to talk to their neighbors. People need to talk to their coworkers. It's really bad the way that the working class in this country has been segmented along lines of race and nationality. And I think that's something that historically has kept us from having a really strong socialist movement and a really strong workers movement. Going back to Oh God, going back to the days of slavery, really, and then going back to the days of Reconstruction. And sometimes it was on purpose, like laws that were passed to keep Black and white workers from commingling, right? Like anti-miscegenation laws. Sometimes it was just sort of a happy accident for capital, right? Because certainly bigotries, certain kinds of bigotries, predated capitalism the way we have it now. But at the same time, we all know as Marxists, that capitalism invented in many ways these modern concepts of race and used race to invent itself at the same time, if I may cite an article by one of my friends. So like, yeah, I don't pretend to have all the answers. Like I'm a white person myself, so I don't really want to say exactly what I think the Black left should be doing. But
well, Dr. Bair, you're a white person. What do you think the Black left should be doing?
Here's a trap. Why don't you step in it?
Because often we ask white people
giving
what
you
should be
permission.
doing. What I'm thinking about is that COVID presents certain opportunities that were not present before. If you said to somebody 2 years ago, if you said, look, we have just to take the most simplest kind of class analysis that's in the popular discourse. There's blue collar workers and there's white collar workers, right? And let's imagine that all of the white collar workers work from home for a year. People would go, that's insane. I mean, you are a lefty crank and that's complete. That will never happen, right? Well, that just happened. And what does that show, right? I mean, well, it shows that the system is maybe more adaptable than we might think. Now, obviously, it's still capitalism, right? So, and it still has all the problems and whatever. It's just a sign that, like, when push comes to shove, there's a lot more flexibility than we might think, And yeah, okay, it takes a deadly pandemic to bring that out. But I think we start with issues, right? The United States is it's so awash in anti-communist propaganda that you don't start off by saying dictatorship of the proletariat. You start off by saying everyone should have a job, everyone should have a house, a place to live, right? Maybe it's not an individual house with the white picket fence or whatever, but everyone should have a roof over their head. Everyone should be fed. Everyone should have an education, right? I mean, and I think this is what Bernie did that was captivating. He went into deeply red areas and said, everyone should have healthcare and everyone should go to college. And thousands of people showed up and said, yeah, right? He didn't come out and say, I'm a communist and, let's embrace communism, right? I mean, but nonetheless, right? So now that brings us to a certain juncture. At that juncture, it could either be co-opted and go into a kind of social democratic route, right? As has happened, right? Going back to, Germany under Bismarck, say, or it could go further, right? I mean, and I think this is where left leadership comes in, right? Because you do need somebody to be like, well, actually, here's a vision of what we really could do, right? We need that vision of what's possible, and I have the sense that the working class is kind of exhausted, right? It has been promised so much, has been lied to so much. Is like government, you guys are going to do nothing, and because that's basically true, right? I mean, that's the truth of the working class's lived experience for the last few decades or whatever, or longer. So I think that's something to overcome. And when you have a moment of possibility where things have already been demonstrated to be very different than we thought they could be, well, maybe there's other things that are possible, right? I mean, maybe the things that we thought were laws aren't laws, maybe we could do a lot more for the average person than we ever have before. Maybe we don't need to be content with a few crumbs from the table.
Dr. Bair, do you think that what we have that seems to be posturing as a left today would actually give up those more radical solutions if they did get a Keynesian 2.0?
Like another kind of New Deal and FDR style thing?
Yes, they would.
Absolutely.
Yeah, probably. I mean, but I think capitalism has to be pushed to the brink of extinction to provide that, right? I mean, so I think, but it pushes itself to the brink of extinction, right? So, I mean, I wonder if we, are we at a juncture like that where I mean, last time I was on the show, right, you were like, well, Biden's gonna give black people reparations as a pressure valve, right? I mean, and these pressure valves are important. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be that policy. I mean, it was an interesting argument. You might be right, but there needs to be some kind of pressure valve, I think, because there's a lot of pressure going on right now, right? I mean, when we look at the number of evictions that have happened during the pandemic and that we're even on the edge of, right? I mean, we're, like I've been saying, mass unemployment crisis combined with mass eviction crisis, that's a very serious situation. Some kind of policies are going to be needed just to kind of keep things together, right? I don't know that it's going to be enough to convict, a few Derek Chauvins or whatever, right? I mean, that's, clearly that's the system sacrificing a pawn in order to keep playing the game. But, is that going to be enough? I think you might have to actually deliver some real improvements in people's lives in order to keep this going. I mean, that's my take.
Well, this was one thing we discussed with Daniel Bessner last week was, Biden could buy off a lot of the online left and a lot of the base of the new left movement by simply just canceling people's student loan debts or like opening up a few jobs. I think, and I want to get your thoughts on this. It is remarkable to me that in such a fundamental crisis and a crisis precipitated by a health crisis, that even in these extraordinary circumstances, the United States of America cannot in any meaningful way move towards a socialized healthcare, whether in the form of Medicare for all or in the form of a nationalized health service as we have in the United Kingdom. And it just strikes me as, even in such a crisis, if that cannot push sort of, let's say, what Pascal always says, the left flank of capital to embrace the necessity of certain social democratic reforms, what on earth will?
I mean, I thought that the Bernie thing made a lot of sense in that in that lane, right? Because it seemed like the Capitol needed a left wing to correct itself and do something resembling a New Deal to keep people from revolting. But guess what? We're nowhere near revolting. Sorry. Like, I've been on the left a minute, and our power is pretty low. Working class power is pretty low right now. But I feel like I interrupted somebody else. Is that all right?
No.
Were we going to talk about automation too?
We are going to get into that. Dr. Bair, do you have to take off right now?
I do, because I have my own class.
Yeah.
I wish I could stay because it's a lot of fun, but I have to go and teach some meditation. We have to chill as well as enrage and inspire. So thanks for having me on. It was great to have the discussion. I'm gonna watch the rest of this later on. So
we got to get you back on when you got more time. Thank you for coming on.
I enjoy that. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Dr. Bair is great. I was telling you about him earlier off air, Jamie. He's usually comes on the show a lot longer, but now that he's blowing up on YouTube with his meditation classes, not only is he a Marxist economist, Brazilian jiu-jitsu specialist, he also teaches meditation.
But let's get to automation. I think Jamie is correct. Pascal, would you do the honors?
Yes, Jamie, I'm currently reading a book that I know you have because I checked you out on a couple of videos talking about automation and the future of work.
Oh, hell yeah.
By Aaron Bananov. I've only started. I'm still in the preface. I have not delved deep into it. And one of the reasons I find it interesting is that, and how I found out about that book is because we did a show, Jason and I, about a week ago today, talking about automation and the potential of labor obsolescence, and what does it mean for a left what does it mean for a left rooted in working class political mobilization that labor could become displaced because of automation. And I was saying that I don't seem to find many voices on the left who are really addressing this. So I kind of searched on YouTube and I saw Richard Wolff and Mark Blythe talking about the potentiality of labor obsolescence. And they kind of dismissed it and Blythe pointed to this book, and I was like, I need to get this book. And I'm kind of in the introductory phases, but I understand from an orthodox Marxist perspective the concept of being rendered obsolete by automation is somewhat dubious because of the productivity quotient in terms of labor, as well as the falling rate of profit, which I think is kind of something that needs to be questioned as well. But what exactly is your position here on the potentiality of labor? I'm not saying that no one will have ever a job ever again. Let's not be that extreme. But what I'm saying is that one thing that we do know is that 30 to 40% of the jobs that were lost during COVID will not be replaced because of automation. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on the role of automation in labor displacement. What does it mean for the left? Or do you think it's something that's overblown? Which is what Banana seems to think as well.
So I think he's making sort of a nuanced argument. He's not saying that automation leads to no job loss, rather sort of the difference, the delta, if you will, between output growth and productivity growth due to automation, right? Because some of the periods of massive growth in employment were also periods of great technological growth, right? If we want to talk about the golden age of capitalism, that's sort of interregnum from the post-war period to the 1970s. And I'm still learning about this myself, right? I'm reading Capital, I'm halfway through it. But basically, automation is it doesn't tell us that much on its own just by looking at it. But I feel like Marx kind of clarified a lot of these things for me, because in periods of expansion, it can appear that automation is actually driving the creation of jobs, right? Because companies are investing in additional factories, and the workers who get like freed up or unemployed by the increase in productivity per worker brought on by automation will find work in these new factories. But we also know when capital invests more in machinery and increased materials to feed the machines, the proportion of capital that's tied up in labor to the proportion of capital that's tied up in non-human things, it changes, and it changes permanently. So if a capitalist opens a second factory with this increased rate of productivity, it's maybe before it was like investing half in human labor, half in machines. Now it's like 75% machines, 25% human labor, right? And we know that you're eventually going to hit a crisis of overproduction, because these are endemic to capitalism. And even like mainstream economists, they call it the business cycle. I know less about mainstream economics than I do about Marxist economics. I feel like I need to learn it the real way first before I go like complicating my understanding of it with bullshit and ideology. But basically, we got capitalists competing against one another to make more and more shit. They make it cheaper. They're hiring more workers. At a certain point in time, oops, we made too much stuff. There's not enough people to buy this stuff. We have a crisis now. We're going to shut down some of the factories. And that is a process that's been happening since the advent of technology and of automation. And eventually now what we're seeing is those cycles are getting worse. They're getting worse. And the manufacturing economy, which was this sort of uniquely productive engine of economic growth and employment, is being replaced with the service economy, which does not have as much potential for growth. Because if you look at the amount that you can juice the productivity per worker, you look at service jobs like care work, like driving a taxi, like cleaning people's house. There's only so much extra productivity you could juice out of every worker by adding technology into the equation. You know, I think that's pretty intuitive for most people to understand. So what we're seeing now is a thing called secular stagnation, a drop in the demand for labor worldwide, not just in the United States either. There's some very convincing charts in that book that show that this is happening all over the place. And now we see a shift back towards people working longer shifts, right? Because there's two ways that capitalists can juice the amount of surplus value they're getting out of the workers. They can increase the productivity per worker with technology, or they can increase the length of the working day, thereby increasing, the amount of time that the workers generating surplus value that gets captured by the capitalist instead of just replacing the amount of value that they took out of the world. So yeah, we're going to need to see some real creative measures, I think, in this new economy, because workers are, I mean, there's just less profits to go around, which seems counterintuitive, right? Because capitalists are richer than ever. But if you look at the rate of profit, it's not great, folks. The line goes down. And when the rate of profit is high, workers are able to kind of claw back more of it for themselves and still have enough to, you know, have profits for capitalists. When it's not so good, then their prospects are a little bit slimmer. But I don't think for a second that it's not possible for workers to organize in this new economy. But I also think we're going to be needing to look outside of the workplace as well, into things like the welfare rights movement. I found them very inspiring, the welfare rights movement of the 60s and 70s, which was organizing for the rights of welfare recipients, right? Unemployed people. And you're like, well, how can we do that? Like, unemployed people don't have the power to shut down the economy. They did a pretty good job. They were creative. They had sit-ins in welfare offices. Their motto was more money now. And they're like, hey, we are still serving a social reproductive function that benefits capital, right? These were mostly single moms, mostly single Black and brown moms who saw their sons going off to die in Vietnam. And they were like, you know what? You guys owe us some money for all the shit that we do. And you owe us money just by virtue of us being human. And they were able to, you know.
But wasn't sorry to cut you off, but wasn't the 60s and 70s the same time we have where Black men have to leave the home because we had employed people to literally go into the projects and kick dudes out of the house and then cut people's benefits off? I mean, they made, what was that movie with Diane Carroll where James Earl Jones got to hide in the closet?
Oh God, Geraldine.
Yeah, they would like, if they found like men's slippers, like they would bust in on welfare recipients. If they found a man's slippers, they would like, you know, cut them off. And that was part of what they were organizing for, these women. They were organizing to say, hey, we deserve this money regardless of what we're doing in our sex lives or our romantic lives.
Mm-hmm.
So do you believe that the, you know, there's a lot of talk about UBI. It looks like you're going to have the exciting Mr. Andrew Yang as your
oh my God,
the supreme leader in New York City.
Don't say that.
He made a name for himself with being a big UBI guy. Do you think UBI is going to be one of the strategies that capital uses in order to sort of counteract the declining rate of profit? And I want to just sort of put a little addendum on this. One of the thoughts that I've had is the difference between rising inequality in sort of the late 19th, early 20th century is the complete pauperization of working class people, working poor people. People couldn't live to survive. Today, you can be poor and live in terrible conditions, but you've got PlayStation, you've got pornography on tap, and you've got cheap food, right? And is UBI and giving people Amazon dollars going to be another way to pacify the working class at the same time as, and by the way, I just want to know, I don't have anything against pornography. I'm just saying that's one of the things that people say pacify people. But my point is this going to be one of the ways that capital, and at least the left flank of capital, both deals with the falling rate of profit and serves to pacify the sort of underclass that will be created by at least some automation of the economy?
Well, I just don't think it's going to work. Like, I'm not an MMT person. I'm sorry. I don't think the government can buy its way out of crisis by printing infinite money, which would only work in the United States anyway, right? Because we hold the world's reserve currency. And I don't think it would even work in the US necessarily, because the government, it can print money. It cannot create value, because we know the value comes from labor. If you believe our boy Marx, which I do, so the thing I like about UBI, I'll start with that, is that it is a good idea to decouple income from work in people's minds, right? We all deserve access to the basic necessities just by virtue of being human, not by virtue of our labor or, working some shitty jobs so capitalists can make money off of us. However, we also need to decouple income from profits, because like I said, profit growth is not great, folks. We got secular stagnation. We got a stagnant economy. Capital is running out of places to go, right? Like, if you need any more evidence that it's all built on sand, see like the massive amounts of VC money that it's flowing to just like ridiculous tech companies that are never going to turn a profit. So
how do you rationalize the falling rate of profit with the realization that the Dow has hit 20,000 in the last few years? That that securitization is demonstrating that corporate profitability is higher. Now, I have a reason why I think that's happening. I'd like to hear how you explain that.
Oh man, I don't know. I mean, the other shoe's going to drop at some point, right? I think a lot of this is fictitious capital. I think it's never a good thing when these indicators of value or whatever are so decoupled, so uncoupled from the thing creating the value in the first place, which is to say human labor power, right? Like the basic formula of capital is MC to M prime, right? Money, commodities to more money. But we have an increasingly financialized economy that just cuts out the commodities and is money to money prime. It's like money, more money, making more imaginary money. And like, I mean, I'm not like a 10th level economist, so I don't understand the stock market that well, but it just seems like monopoly money.
My response would be twofold. And I think you're right in some regards. Number one of the largest reasons why we have such profitability in the stock market is that most of the large Fortune 500 companies are engaging in major stock buybacks. They're literally buying back their own stocks to increase their profitability. And number two, we've had a phenomenon of quantitative easing from the Federal Reserve for almost a decade that is basically almost like printing funny money, because it keeps the rate of interest so low that money is so cheap that we have financial corporations that can borrow money from the Fed in the United States and rent it out in foreign countries at a higher rate and make money from that. So there are all kinds of ways to jig the system to make the illusion that profitability is actually being maintained, particularly when you have things like, a Fed that's keeping the market floating, which has been the case for since the 2008 crash, and the massive amount of stock buybacks that have been going back. And let's not also forget the fact that the first COVID bailout under Trump was a wealth transfer to the 1%, pretty much largely. So I don't necessarily dispute the reality of the decrease in profitability, particularly in corporate profits. I just think that it's going to be very hard to verify that with the multitude of ways in which finance capital finds ways to reify itself, jig the numbers, and make it seem like their shareholder prices are through the roof, when the actual items that are being manufactured have no value, right? When Instagram has a voter share net worth as a company more than Kodak did at its height, there's a problem. I mean, Instagram is a company that doesn't even have 5,000 employees compared to Kodak that had tens of thousands of employees all over the United States. So the whole valuation system, the nature of the economy, and the nature of the way in which all of these things are being traded and valued and hyper speculation makes it almost impossible for us to actually derive or find the actual true rate of profitability in this system, because there are so many mechanisms in a highly financialized capitalism to obscure if profitability is decreasing, because there's always some way to pump money into the system.
I mean, Instagram does have 5,000 employees. And you have to keep in mind that the tech sector is very huge when it comes to third parties. I mean, we were having that conversation before. So how many employees actually work for Instagram is probably very small compared to the people that literally work inside the building. So we have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, but still nothing compared to Kodak, though.
I don't know, because I don't know how many people they hire third party. I mean, that shit's all over the fucking world.
And like, I mean, it developed this way for a reason, right? Like, money would not be pouring into these ridiculous fictitious financial instruments and these ridiculous tech companies that are never going to turn a profit if it could still make a profit on traditional manufactured goods. But it's not. So that's why it went that way. Like, stock buybacks weren't just like a flight of fancy. They were like, oh shit, what can we do to, keep the profits chugging along? But it's like, it's gotta have an end. Like, I really do not believe that capitalism is going to be the first mode of production in human history to last forever. I think we are headed for a collapse one way or another. And I think we got to get ready to take some measures to keep ourselves and each other alive when that happens.
Class conflict can end in the sort of revolutionary reconstruction of society, or the mutual destruction of the two contending classes. So, it's pretty scary. We could go Mad Max world.
What's not going to happen is what these like techno utopian UBI theorists believe is going to happen. And there's kind of libertarian ones like Elon Musk, and there's kind of more left-wing ones who think it's going to be like some kind of transitional phase on the way to communism.
So you're not a fan of fully automated luxury communism?
I mean, it like I said, it has its place, but I think the Bananov book is a really good corrective to what that idea gets wrong. Like the idea that eventually we're just going to have full automation and everyone's going to survive on this UBI that's, magically printed by our government and not extracted from the global South. I believe that someone has to be left holding the bag. Like that is absolutely not possible. And like that would take us out of capitalism, right? If people aren't working for a boss anymore in order to live. But that's never going to be true worldwide, because the value has to come from somewhere. If it's not being extracted from workers in the United States, it's going to be extracted from workers in other places.
I think that's the fundamental problem with the MMT discourse, is that, like you mentioned, it only works if you have a currency that people want. Zimbabwe is not going to be able to print its way out of economic crisis. Only the United States and maybe a few other select countries can even engage in that policy, and it's not even clear how far printing money. I mean, there must be some sort of flex in the American system that it could print money to a certain degree, but like you said, the value has to come from somewhere, and if it's not in America, it's outside of America.
Yeah, like I think the sort of techno utopians also kind of leave out the importance of just like the balance of class forces, and how like even sort of the better ones, like the left UBI theorists, think that we could somehow have this peaceful transition out of capitalism without like a massive and violent backlash from the capitalists themselves to, maintain their role in society and their position of power. Like there's really no way around it. Like we have to organize as a class, and this organization needs to be global, because it is not possible to provide a decent standard of living for every single person in the world and preserve capitalist social relations. It's just not.
Well, I mean, I think that there will be a reaction, and not to burst anyone's bubble, I think the reaction is going to come from the hard right. I think that there's going to be an ultimate reactionary right reaction to displacement, labor displacement, and I think it's going to be playing on a lot of gender politics, and you're going to see a lot of disgruntled men, it's going to be multiracial, and they're going to be moving hardcore to reactionary right-wing politics, and we're going to see something that's going to make Trump look like a fantasy.
Who do you think that's going to be?
I don't know who it's going to be, but I think that politics is very real, and I think it's very possible.
Like you're saying, like sort of this right-wing nationalism maybe will become slightly less racist towards
no, I think
it's already less racist.
People who were born in America.
Look at the
Boogaloo. I think that it can be racist and still have a cross-racial appeal.
But it is less. We have to admit it.
It does. Racist. It is racist, and it does have a cross-racial appeal. If you look at who's in the Proud Boys, or even if you look at the people who stormed the Capitol, they're not 100% white.
Yeah,
that's bad. And like that will, if that continues, that's gonna, like I do fear a right-wing nationalist movement that has slightly more appeal beyond just like hard right Nazis. Yeah,
I think the hard right Nazis is a kind of that's socially not acceptable. But throughout history, brutal imperial orders have been maintained by people of color. The British didn't hold down India with just white people. It held down India with a 1 million-man army of sepoys, right? And I think what liberals fail to understand, when I listen to MSNBC every morning, so Pascal doesn't have to.
You're a good man. That's reparations.
No, I'm taking it for the team, and they cannot fathom the appeal that far right politics might have to to people of color. But you go, Black people, Middle Eastern people, people from Latin America. A, they're not monolithic groups. B, they have their own histories and their own divisions within themselves. And C, quite simply, issues like misogyny and sexism have a big appeal. Middle Eastern people, Black people, Latino people, they aren't all sort of enlightened, sort of third wave feminists. And I think this kind of sexism and patriarchy and sort of hierarchy does appeal to elements that don't buy into the kind of superficial symbolic identity politics offered by centrist liberalism today.
Well, but before you go, we're at an hour. And as you guys know, we cut the show at an hour because we do give this show to Zero Books. And I hate editing. I just hate editing. And we have a Patreon. And we're going to go. Jamie, would you want to stick around for a little bit longer? I know it's late where you are. And if you can't, we totally understand.
Yeah, I could stick around a little bit longer.
Whoop, whoop.
Jean, can
Are you having fun with us? Are you having fun with us, Jamie?
Yeah, I like talking about this this kind of stuff. I'm still not used to being able to do it uninterrupted on a show with multiple people. So
you get interrupted a lot?
I mean, not since I left the Majority Report.
Oh, I told you we were going to stay away from the spicy questions. But if you want, I get interrupted on my own fucking podcast too. So whatever.
I met Jamie in the Majority Report studio. I brought her a sandwich from a conference in Yale.
That was very nice of you.
Oh, look at fancy pants over there. Did you doff your hat at her too? Fucking.
I did not doff my hat. I did steal a bunch of Majority Report fridge stickers. I will admit that.
So if you guys are patrons, the link is already up for the after hours segment. It looks like it'll be all four of us hanging out for a while, continuing this very, very fun conversation. I want to say thank you to moderator John Ross, Kenzo Shibata. I see you, boy. Thank you guys for checking us out. If you are a patron, go over to the link for the after hours, and we